Hey, what's going on, everyone? It is Monday, and of course that means it is Ask Mike time. Welcome in, Alyssa Orange alongside Mike Irwin. And Mike got a big game tomorrow at Bud Walton Arena, but I know you got a lot of questions from the basketball team from their past couple of games. So let's jump right into it. Our first question is from Armand Abbey, who asks, what's up with Chris Likes these last couple of games? He looks like a different player, unusual for a player to make a jump like this so late into the season.
You know, Eric Musselman sort of addressed this after the Mississippi State game the other night. He said really he thinks it started with the fact that Chris Likes got tired of sitting on the bench. He said the bench is a great motivator. And what they wanted him to do, and they talked to him about Musselman said he's really kind of a quiet player, doesn't say a lot. And they went to him and said, look, you're a senior, you got to be more of a leader, and that starts in practice. So he started being vocal in practice. Then he started making an impact in practice, and he said he was helping us get better in practice before it started translating to the game. But once that happened, then it translated to the game. And the other thing he said was, it's not just his offense. And my take on his offense, because I went and looked, he scored 10 points, I think, in one of those last two games, 9 in the other. That's about his average. So it's not like he's scoring a lot more points. It's when he's scoring the points. He's hitting some pressure shots that he wasn't hitting before. So that's his offense. But then the difference really is his defense. Musselman said that a lot of people think a 5'8" guy can't deal with a 6'5", 6'4" guard. And he said, I had some short guards like that in the NBA. And he said what they do is they play defense from underneath. And they can get a lot of turnovers that way. And that's what we've seen him do in the last couple of games. He's reached underneath and got a jump ball situation, or reached underneath and pulled that ball loose. It's honestly, when you're trying to force a turnover with a point guard or really anybody dribbling with the ball, you're much less likely to foul if you come up underneath than try to do it. Well, how much easier it is if you're already down there. So I think they kind of convinced him you can do that better. You've got a natural advantage at that. So all of that put together has resulted in him playing a lot better. And I think he was almost kind of the last piece of the puzzle that began. There's still Jackson Robinson, and we still don't know what's going on with him, because they brought him in as a three-point shooter, and he's the only one of the transfers that's not really making much of a contribution right now. I'm not sure what's going on with that. But Likes was kind of the last one that kind of joined the group to start playing better.
Yeah. Well, DeVaughn Davis, as Landy says, has very quietly started to look like he did last year. It's good to see him stepping up as well.
DeVaughn reminds me of he's kind of like a compliment player that as things start going well, then he becomes an assertive player. But when he was trying to sort of make something happen back when this team wasn't playing well, he wasn't good in that role. And if you stop and think about it, what was going on last year? He had all these people around him. And then when they were playing well, especially in the NCAA tournament, he just started stepping up. Well, now, as a lot of these other players that I've talked about have stepped up, and he's surrounded by players that are playing better, I think he's got more confidence, and we're seeing him do things like his shooting was awful there for a while. He's still not shooting great, but what's he doing? Like in the Mississippi State game, he's hitting a key jumper, you know, with 30 seconds left or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and then he does these things that'll drive you crazy in a game. You're going, what's he doing? And then all of a sudden he's got a great assist, or he sneaks in drives through for a backdoor layup, goes by everybody. He's still a little bit inconsistent, but yeah, I think the deal with him is, as the team's gotten better, he's gotten better.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he's just getting a little bit more comfortable with himself as well. All right. Jay Farrell says, this winning streak has been nice, but things are about to get real for Muss and his guys coming up. Auburn, Kentucky, Bama.
I don't know what that is. That's wrong on the screen. Just go ahead and read it.
Okay. Sorry. Jay Farrell says this win streak has been nice, but some things are about to get real for Muss and his guys coming up. Auburn, Kentucky, Bama, and Tennessee twice. The wheels could still come off for them. That's a little dramatic.
Yeah, well, you know, there's always going to be people. I think there's some worry there. The better a team gets, the more you start climbing out of that hole you were in, more people start finding reasons to still be nervous. It's like the glass is half empty for some of these people. I think he's overstating it. Yes, the schedule does get tougher. Why does it get tougher? Because you're going to be playing 2 top 5 teams. One of them is number 1, the other one's 2 or 3 or whatever they are, Kentucky. So, yeah, you're going to play those 2 teams, and you haven't played them before, so that part of the schedule is tougher. But the rest of the schedule, I don't know. Tennessee's playing better now, and you got to play them twice, so I guess that's difficult.
Sure.
But you've got to look at what they've just done, and I wouldn't overlook the games that they've won. Take Georgia, for instance. You can look at that and say, okay, well, they beat Georgia at Georgia, and Georgia's the bottom of the SEC. Well, Auburn almost got beat by them, 1 point. I mean, it was right there, or 2 points, I think. It was right there. And it just didn't happen for Georgia, but it came oh so close in the last few seconds of the game. Well, Arkansas beat those guys by 26. So that's not unimpressive what they did there. Georgia's team, this is a year in which virtually anybody in the SEC can beat anybody else on a given night. You always hear that, and it's usually a little bit exaggerated. It's not exaggerated this year. So those teams that Arkansas have beaten it during this streak may not be right up there at the top, but they are teams that have pulled off upsets of other teams, and in that streak, Arkansas has not been upset.
Sure.
And so I don't think you can overlook that. The other thing is this. They've got 8 more games left. I started looking at it. I think the SEC is going to get in at least 5. Well, they will get in 5 and maybe 6. If you're above 500, you're going to get in, I think. If Arkansas goes 3-5 from here on out, they still get in at 10-8. So it's not like they can't afford to lose a game or 2 along the way. They can afford, in my opinion, to have a losing record over these last 8 games because of what they've done, and I think they'll still get in, and I don't think they'll have a losing record.
Yeah.
So I think he's overstating it a little bit.
I don't think any wheels are going to fall off if they lose a couple of games here down the stretch. And again, like Mush just said in a press conference, 1 game at a time. You just never know what's going to happen.
That's what you got to do.
All right, now we're back to Razorback Redneck, and it says, it looks to me that Auburn got away with a charge which led to the winning basket against Georgia. SEC refs strike again, but in this case, I'm glad because it allows us to play the #1 team in the country at home on Tuesday.
You know, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was watching that Auburn-Georgia game, and when Auburn came down the floor, and it looked like there might be a charge there, I thought, uh-oh. If this ball goes the other way with 5 seconds, 6 seconds left, what if Georgia wins this game? It's going to totally ruin the game Tuesday night with Arkansas. It's going to mean the #1 team doesn't come in here. It's going to take some of the luster off. Auburn's going to be really mad. They'll be harder to beat, blah, blah, blah. You just go on. And all that's going through my head when that's happening. And then they didn't call it. And I'm like, oh, good. Now, look, I've gone back and looked at that. And it does look like that the Georgia's players that got run over was maybe his feet were moving just a little bit. Here's what I would say after looking at that call. It was a good no call. They could have called a charge, could have called a block. Blocked would have been horrible because then it sends Auburn to the line with a chance to win the game with free throws. But it was a good no call, and they still had to go and make the shot after that, and they did. So, and it was good for Arkansas, even though it was bad for Georgia.
Yeah. It was an exciting game, though.
It was.
Crazy for Georgia coming back that way in the second half. All right, Matt Yoder says, concerning the Big 12 SEC Challenge, we're still on it. Is it possible to schedule these matchups a week or 2 before the challenge? Then you could pair up the best teams, second best teams, etc. Would give a much better idea as to which is the better conference.
You know, that might be a better idea for TV, but it's not going to happen because, as we all know, athletic directors, schools, they have to have their schedule set to sell tickets before the season starts. I can remember going all the way back to when I was a kid and lived in this little town, and football season, and be the next fall, and it's the middle of the summer, was always a big deal when the schedule came out. They started putting it up on calendars, and you go to the post office and go to a gas station, and your schedule would be up there, and you could just look and see who they were playing, and then you go, okay, we play them after this. And that hasn't changed very much. People want to know who you're going to play before the season ever starts. And you just can't jump up with a game halfway through the season, go, yeah, here's a surprise opponent right now. I know they do it at the end of the season because it's the only way you can do the playoffs. But you're not going to do that for season ticket purposes. And then look at the other problem it would create. How do you travel that way? You find out like 2 days before you leave.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've got your own chartered jet, you're fine. But what about if you're going to go in there on a Friday for a Saturday game and you want to spend the night, what if the hotels are all booked up by the time you get there? So it's a nice idea for TV, and I'm sure the TV people would love it, but it's not practical.
Yeah, and you also have to consider, like, Arkansas, that wasn't the only Big 12 school that they played this year. They played Oklahoma as well, so you got to have to know who your Big 12 SEC opponent is, and then that way you could then also go schedule Baylor or OU or Kansas State.
There's just a lot of reasons why that doesn't work.
It is an interesting idea, though, but that would just...
The TV, if you're a TV guy,
you'd love it.
Hey, yeah, let's do that. Schools are going, no, we don't want that.
All right, Omaha 12 says, need a rule change. Razorback women's basketball was down 2 to Tennessee in OT and got fouled when they are setting up a three-pointer for win. With less than 30 seconds in a game, the team being fouled should have a choice of free throws or ball in my opinion. What about you?
I'm curious to get your reaction to this.
I'm trying to figure out what he's talking about.
Well, he's basically saying that if you're up by 3 points and the other team, or you're behind by 3 points, and you want to come in and make a three-pointer to tie the game up, or let's say you're only behind by 2 and you want to you want to win. He's saying that the other team a lot of times will foul you in that situation.
So you can't hit a three. You have to make 2 free throws.
And he's saying they ought to eliminate that by if you get fouled, you have the option of just taking it out and trying, not shooting the free throws and trying to go for a 3 instead of going to the line, hitting 2, and you're still down by 1 with seconds left.
Interesting.
And I don't like that idea because it helps the offensive team or the team that's behind. But I don't think you should reward the team that's behind. If you're the team that's ahead, it gives you a defensive option, another option to defend yourself against losing the game. And I think you've earned that because you have the lead.
Yeah. Why do we got to make it easier for these guys?
And especially we're talking women's basketball here. They already have that rule where if you're down and the other team scores or something, so now they're up by 1, for instance, but there's only 4 seconds left. In the men's game, you got to inbound that ball and go all the way down.
Well, it doesn't even matter who's up or down. It's just at the end of the game, you can call a timeout and advance the ball.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
And that seems kind of weird because the team that's behind is automatically given almost a pass for being behind. Here's an extra thing that will help you maybe win the game. And maybe it keeps the game more exciting. People are sitting there going, ooh, what about they inbound down here and hit a 3? But I just don't like the idea of a team having the lead and you're giving some reward to the other team to give them a chance to beat you or tie the game. That's their problem. They're the ones that got down, not you. You know? So
I might not be remembering what he was talking about. All I remember at the end of that Tennessee game was Amber Ramirez. They inbounded it to Amber Ramirez, who shot a 3 from the wing, and she's like money at that spot, and she just completely missed. And Mike Neighbors talks about how the team just kind of, I think their legs were a little out from under them possibly, but
the thing
I don't know. I might just be misremembering what he's referring to, but I agree with you in terms of tough to kind of help the other team out.
What I saw in that Tennessee game, which really just bothered me, was the fact that Arkansas was winning that game with defense, and they were up by 13 points early in the second half, and it was because of the defense they were playing. Those refs called about 5 fouls in about 60 seconds on the clock, just like whistle, 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 whistle. Suddenly Arkansas is in foul trouble, and their defense, they have to totally back off. And it totally changed the way the game was being played. It just took Arkansas out of their strength and let Tennessee go back and do what they normally do.
Yeah.
And that was my complaint. It's not that I think officials cheat or anything like that. I just think sometimes they just go whistle happy, like in that situation. As a referee, yes, you want to do your job, but I don't think you want to influence the outcome of a game like that. Yes, we all know that an official can make a charge block call or something like that at the end of a game, and yes, it can decide who wins the game. But this decided how the game was being played. Changed the way one of the teams was using to win. They took it out of their hands. And it wasn't 1 foul or 2 fouls, it was several. And the thing was, later on, the officiating went back to normal. But by that time, the damage had already been done because you allowed Tennessee to kind of get back in this game and get back on track. And Arkansas they just never had going what they had before. So that was my complaint about that game.
All right, to football. MDW says when OU and Texas officially join the SEC, it will mean that for the first time in its athletic history, Arkansas will regularly compete against teams from every state it borders. That's a fun fact. Do you think this can become an advantage for the Hogs that they haven't had in the past?
Well, let's think about what he's talking about, because I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
But you had Texas, you had Missouri, you had Tennessee, you had Mississippi and Louisiana.
Yeah.
So they were surrounded by teams from that they played in their conference, except for this one little thing over on the side, Oklahoma. So when you bring Oklahoma into the mix, it means yes, you're all everywhere on your border. Now that's an interesting, fun fact, but let me just tell you what I think is much more practical about this. And there's a couple of things. Number one, when Arkansas left the Southwest Conference and went into the SEC, what happened was initially they weren't playing any Southwest Conference teams anymore, and it hurt their recruiting in Texas. Why? Because you're not playing there anymore, and you're not getting written about in newspapers. You're not on TV and TV stories or online stories or whatever. They're pretty much ignoring you because you don't play anybody in their state. So that's sort of where the A&M game came from. Back when A&M was in the Southwest Conference, they had that Southwest Classic to get Arkansas more exposure in an area where they always do well anyway and where they always have a lot of fans, which is Dallas. So that helped. Now what will happen is when Texas comes in, you've got two teams from Texas you will be playing. And you're not going to be playing them in Texas every year, but you're going to be talked about. You're going to become a part of what's going on, and it's going to move more basketball fans over to the SEC. Look at what's going. I'm almost certain that Longhorn Network's going to go away, and it will just be replaced in Texas with the SEC network. It's already there on cable. You can get it, but now that's what everybody's going to be looking at. Well, Arkansas is a part of that, so they automatically become more. The fans become more, a kid growing up in Texas will hear about them more. So that's the good part with Texas. Now with Oklahoma, though, this is huge in my opinion, because you've had this team, Oklahoma, sitting over there all these decades, 100 and whatever years, and Arkansas just plays them every once in a while. And it's always a big deal when they play. They just don't play very often. And what really creates a rivalry? Look at the SEC trying to create a rivalry with Missouri because they go, oh, up there, oh, okay. And Arkansas fans are going, they want to win the game, but they don't care about Missouri. But now you throw OU into the mix, that's just a drive down the interstate. You can go over to Tulsa and down or down to Fort Smith and over. It's not that far. You got fans on the border mixing with each other and talking and yapping back and forth at each other. And I really believe that Arkansas is going to end up with either in a pod or in a division with Oklahoma playing them every year.
Yeah.
That is going to, here's the problem. They said Arkansas doesn't have a natural rival in the SEC, and you sort of developed one with LSU, but come on, it's still a long way down to Baton Rouge. And it was sort of a rivalry, but this is a thing with Oklahoma. Now, to ask yourself, do you think Arkansas OU would be bigger than Arkansas LSU?
I can hear from the tone of your voice that you're more excited about this OU possibility than you've ever been about Arkansas and Missouri.
And LSU.
And LSU.
I hear a lot. I go on Facebook all the time and listen to people talking about this. It's going to be a huge rivalry. It will become, I think, bigger than Arkansas-Texas because Texas, I think, is going to be in a different pod. So you won't play them as often. Plus, they're further away. Their fans are further away.
So what does this become again another Arkansas declares themselves a new rival and OU doesn't care?
Maybe. I don't know how that's going to work because they'll still have their thing with Texas.
Sure.
But I'm thinking they won't play. They won't be
in Oklahoma State.
That's still. They're going to have to work that out. Whether they have to work that out. Yeah. I mean, the Aggies haven't played the.
Yeah, that would be tough to. Yeah, but that would be tough to. You can't just ruin that. You can't ruin Bedlam.
Well, they ruined the Thanksgiving Day game with Texas and Texas A&M for a long time. Look, I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I do think that Texas and OU might not be quite as big as it was just because they're in a different part of the conference, but I don't know. I don't know where that heads. And I don't know how OU feels about Arkansas, but I'm telling you that will become big for Arkansas. Hey, keep in mind that Arkansas had that huge rivalry with Texas all those years, and Texas didn't feel the same way about them.
That's true.
In the 60s with Darrell Royal and Frank Broyles, it was kind of that way, but a lot of times Texas was sort of like, we care about A&M, we care about OU, we don't care about Arkansas, but that didn't change the way Arkansas fans felt.
Sounds like.
I think that OU thing is going to be the big thing. I think it will help recruiting like he's asking for, but I think it will help the fan and generate fan interest.
I think
it's
it sounds like David Basil needs to make a new trophy, and
Maybe
we'll call
two.
it the Arkansas River rivalry.
You could do that.
Right? You could do that?
You can do that.
Okay.
And you create one with Texas, too. I don't know what you'd call that. But
I don't know. You'd have to figure that one. All right. Rob's 4516 says, can you explain how the portal works in regard to how many players a team can bring in? I've seen where 7 is the max, but some teams seem to be bringing in a lot more than that.
Okay, he's saying 7. He's seen what a lot of people saw, which was 7 was the max, and that was floating around somewhere back in December. And that was based on the number of players that they signed. There is no theoretical limit. The limit is in the total number of scholarships you can offer in a single recruiting cycle, which is 25. So you can bring in as many players out of the portal as you want. You just have to reduce the number of freshman signees from high school. And some coaches, like Sam Pittman, are bringing in more out of the portal. I think that's a temporary thing. I think you're going to see in a year or two, once he gets his own recruiting out of high school players the way he wants, you will see a few portal players being brought in key areas where you might have had an injury or a guy left and you don't have a good replacement. But I think for the most part, right now, the portal has benefited Arkansas, therefore he's brought in more players, which means it's reduced the number of high school guys he can sign. But there is no specific limit, high school, portal, there's a limit on the total of the two.
And what I think you're seeing from the portal right now is success in areas you need it the most right now. And that's where, you can look at Georgia and you can look at even Alabama or LSU, Arkansas, the success that they've had, bringing in players saying, we need a linebacker right now. We need defensive linemen right now who are big enough, strong enough to play against SEC grown men on the other side. And then you look at like maybe your running backs where it's like, this is a position where I can load it with some young guys and develop that talent like we saw with A.J. Green and Rocket Sanders and Dominique Johnson.
The best example I can think of is Felipe Franks.
Yeah.
But if they hadn't brought him in, KJ's got to play a year early, and it might not have benefited him. But it worked out really good because KJ learned from Felipe. He helped Arkansas get off to a good start under Pittman, and it led to what we've seen this past season. So the portal is extremely important, and those people that are against the portal or want something done to it, if they're Hog fans, they need to, again, look at what Sam Pittman's done because he's worked the portal to his advantage. It hasn't hurt him.
No, it hasn't. It hasn't really hurt any team on campus yet.
Yeah.
So that's good. All right. Alex 4Hogs88 wants to know, what are your thoughts on the hire of Deke Adams as D-line coach? He brings in some very valuable SEC experience, I believe.
Yeah. We talked, I think, last week about Sam Pittman hiring these young assistant coaches because they can recruit. The theory is that they're younger, so they can relate better to recruits. They kind of know the social media stuff better, work that better, which is important.
Yep.
And so that's what Pittman has done in many cases. In this particular case, they had a position which is a problem right now. I've been told that if there's an area on that team that they're most concerned about next year, it is the D-line. They need to develop the players they've got. They've got some people coming in, but they need to develop the players they got. Therefore, this hire needed to be more balanced toward coaching. Now, I think he's still got a good reputation as a recruiter, but he's coached at 3 other SEC schools. He's had he's developed first-round NFL draft choices, and that's what they were looking at. This guy knows how to coach.
Yeah.
And they've told him when he came in, you are taking over the problem area. Barry Odom's not looking over your shoulder. He's back there in the secondary working with his new cornerbacks coach. You're going to have to, we want your experience. You run your own show there on the D-line. So that's sort of why he was hired.
All right. Lake City Hawk says, can you find out or do you know the eligibility status of Dorian Gerald? I haven't seen any kind of announcement of him transferring or retiring. It seems to me like he won a starting job every year, and then unfortunately injury wiped him out, so his return could be a big help for them on said D-line.
All of that's good, but it's just there's one problem there. He was a super senior last year, so he has no eligibility left. He's not on campus. I don't know if he's on campus. He's not in school. He's not in the football program, and he doesn't have any eligibility left. And it's a tragedy.
Your heart breaks for him, man.
He was one of the best players I've ever seen that just never really got a chance because, like he said, every year in the fall he would win the job and then he'd get hurt, and he finally just ran out of time.
I know, heartbreaking stuff. All right, Blood Red Hog says, I think staff continuity helps recruiting. If Pittman can retain Browse and Odom for another season, that bodes well for the Hogs. This is what we did all this Googling yesterday for. Yeah. When was the last time we were able to keep the same OC and DC for 3 or more consecutive seasons?
Yeah, this is one of those brain buster questions because it's pretty hard. You can't just, you don't just Google it and it shows you. You can Google and look at certain things, but what I found was if you typed in Arkansas football 1984, you might get the offensive coordinator and they wouldn't tell you the defensive coordinator. It varied in the way they were doing it. Now, I later found out that I could have gone into the press guide and there was a little page we could have found that would have shown all of this, but we didn't know it. So we're running around trying to figure all this out.
We did pretty well. For the record, we went through Houston, Petrino, Bielema, obviously Morse doesn't count because he was only here for 2 years, and then like Pittman. So we went through. We eliminated every
coach back to Hatfield. And then when I started looking at that, I called Rick Schaefer, who was the SID at that time. And we put our heads together and started remembering, and we finally figured it out, and then I was later able to confirm it, that Ken Hatfield was his own offensive coordinator from 84 through 88. And he had the same defensive coordinator, Fred Goldsmith, from 84 through 88. So that's 5 seasons. Now, here's the thing, because the question is, that helps you.
Continuity.
Continuity helps you. So you might say, well, Hatfield, yeah, that makes sense. He had the best winning percentage of any Razorback coach ever, so he did it because of continuity. The problem was his best 2 teams were after he made switches. So they were okay with him as the offensive coordinator, and Goldsmith, a lot of people didn't like Goldsmith, but they did okay. But honestly, they were better when they made a change. So it's not always the continuity that does it. Most of it is whether that person is good at their job or not. So if you've got a good offensive coordinator and a good defensive coordinator and you keep them for 3 or more years, yeah, that's great. But if you don't, there's a reason why you don't keep them for 3 straight years.
Yeah. All right, Boss Hog wants to know, why would Miles Rouser end up at an FCS school when he had tons of offers from top-level D1?
Yeah, when that started coming out, a lot of people were claiming, NIL again, like where'd he go? Campbell? Some Campbell soup? Some school that I've never heard of. And the first thing people thought was, they jumped up and offered him $500,000. Well, I don't think a school like that's got boosters that have that kind of money for a defensive back, a safety. They might do it for a quarterback. We saw it done to Florida State. They got.
Well, he was a cornerback, and it was Deion Sanders. And you're gonna make me mad again. You're gonna make me upset. But yes, they took him away from Florida State to Jackson State, but he's a cornerback.
Well, this was a safety, but I don't think
this guy was a quarterback. Deion took him.
That's what I'm saying. So the point,
I thought you said quarterback.
No, cornerback. But the point is, I don't think a school like that's going to pay that much for a 4-star safety. Now, again, if you were getting some big stud,
again, it's NIL. It ain't the school.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is the booster. Whatever booster you think was paying this money, he's going to jump up and offer. If he's going to do that, in my opinion, it would be for a quarterback. If there's like a stud quarterback out there and you think to yourself, I've got a lot of money and I'm a Campbell diehard and I want to bring that quarterback to here, and you offer him $700,000, maybe he comes there. But what I'm saying is that's not what happened in this case. I don't think that's what they were doing. And so you start looking into it, and what you find out is that all of those offers that he mentioned, he did have a ton of them, they all started backing off. And there were 2 issues, I was told. One of them was academics. He was not an academic qualifier, and you'd have to do some things to get him in. The other thing was he apparently was hurt about half of his senior year, and a lot of recruits don't understand this. I had a brother-in-law that went through this one time. If you get a coach, your head coach, not a brother-in-law, he was a nephew, and if you get a coach, your head coach tells a recruiter some negative things about you, you're pretty much dead. And it doesn't have to be true. That coaches will listen to the guy's own coach. Now, in this particular thing, I think what was happening was his coach was saying, look, he got all these offers, it went to his head, then all of a sudden he's injured a lot.
He wanted to opt out of his senior year.
He's opting out. And so people started backing away from him because he is good. Now, here's what I think will happen to him. He'll go there. If he makes his grades and plays hard, he can go somewhere else after a year. But that's Arkansas. He did not go, nah, Arkansas, we don't want you. I think a lot of those schools just backed away from him, and he took what he could get.
That's interesting.
That's what I was told.
And we've seen it happen before. All right. Dr. Strangeport says this past week, Eric Dickerson talked about his gold Trans Am that the Texas A&M boosters bought him before he went to SMU. He stated that all the Southwest Conference teams are trying to cut a deal with him to come to their school. I cannot imagine Lou Holtz doing that or Arkansas to allow that as well.
Here's what I'm pretty sure of. Arkansas did not get involved in any kind of bidding war with Eric Dickerson. That wasn't what happened with them back in those days. I'm not going to say Arkansas was just 100% squeaky clean. I've looked into this for decades because my attitude was, hey, I want to find out. Do they cheat or they have this reputation that they don't. And a lot of times when they don't get a player, they say it's because we weren't willing to buy him. This goes back years ago. So I'd always look into it, talk to whoever. And what I was told was virtually every school cheats, but not through the coaches. It's usually through the boosters. Only those schools that are just nuts, like SMU was, to get under the death penalty.
Like Miami with that,
yes,
that one Shapiro guy.
When you're not careful, then your coaches are actually involved in it. But the smart schools, the coaches stay out of it, and their boosters are involved, and the coach doesn't want to know anything about it. They don't hear about it. They don't know about it. It's done through boosters. And I was told that at Arkansas, there were a few boosters from time to time that would bend the rules a little bit, but they said it was rinky-dink stuff. Like, you like a certain player, you're a booster, you're talking to him after the game, you hand him a couple of 20s. Go buy your girlfriend dinner, you know. Oh man, look at the tires on your car, they're worn out. I'll buy you new tires. Things like that. That's what I was told went on at Arkansas. Where at other schools, some of them, especially in the Southwest Conference, where you had A&M, SMU, University of Texas, there were a bunch of schools really bidding for players. At most of those schools, they're buying guys' cars. At Arkansas, they're buying them tires. You know, it's just kind of rinky-dink stuff. It's not any, and then the Ted Herod thing where Arkansas kind of got penalized, and it's the only time they've really been nailed on any scholarship or any NCAA violations. They ended up losing a few scholarships over a period of time because what they had was some guys that were in a summer work program for a booster, and he hired them down in Dallas, and then they supposedly didn't really come to work. Somebody punched their time cards, and that's sort of a violation. I think they said it amounted to $1,000, $1,500 total if they didn't come to work, what they got paid for not doing. So they got a few scholarships taken away for a year or two. That's usually what you're dealing with Arkansas. But again, a lot of other schools, and it's interesting, how much is NIL going to prevent that? I think it almost takes it away because you shift from outright cheating to NIL cheating if you're going to cheat. I'm not saying everybody cheats on NIL, but the question I was asked last week, I think now you're crazy if you cheat because you don't have to. Just develop a good NIL program, let the word get out, and it'll help you recruit.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Mousetown asked, what did you think about Nick Saban going off on Texas A&M's big NIL deals after Saban had admitted back in December that his freshman quarterback already had NIL money of close to $1 million? Well, Nicky Boy sounds a bit like a hypocrite.
It may sound like that, but you have to understand what he was talking about. I went back and looked at that. At that time, this freshman quarterback was already signed. And then he got the NIL money. He did get close. Saban said it's close to 7 figures. So we know his NIL deals got up toward $1 million. But this is perfectly legal under the rules now if it's done afterward. What he was implying, and this is what was interesting about this, he was implying that this whole A&M thing was done up front, and that is against the rules. And then you throw Nick Saban or you throw Lane Kiffin into this, and what was he saying? He was saying, well, you got all these rich oil guys down in Texas that got more money than they know what to do with. We don't have guys like that in Mississippi. So we can't match their NIL money. We can't come up with $30 million or whatever they're doing. So there should be caps placed on the amount an NIL deal can be. And I had said that on this show maybe 6 months ago, and somebody on Hogville, the message board, caught on there and said, yeah, but the NFL caps are salary caps for playing. You would be putting a cap on somebody's ability to endorse. And as he pointed out, there is no salary cap, no cap on NFL endorsement money. You can make as much money on endorsements as you want. So that's still a sticky area to do that, because if you put a limit on that, somebody's going to sue, and then you're going to have to sit back and see if it holds up in court. I still think stuff is going to happen with NIL. I'm not sure what it is, but this is going to get interesting. This Nick Saban, Lane Kiffin,
Jimbo
Fisher popping off, and they don't like each other, and that's going to only get it's going to get heated.
Yeah, Jimbo, the only former assistant able to beat Saban until Kirby Smart recently. So you know, and they were friends. You know, but hey, you know what? Don't mess with recruiting.
Yeah.
It gets nasty.
Making enemies out of them.
They get nasty. All right, Parallax Pig says, since Auburn boosters don't play well with others, does Harsin make it to start of the season, or as Auburn's head coach, actually, does he survive? This is fascinating to me. Mike, would love your opinion on it.
Well, as far as I know, nothing's happened as of today. Although this is a breaking story. I think he's still the coach, but you read stuff every day that sort of indicates he's not going to be. To me, it's one of these he said, she said things. You can take this whole business and divide it, make a line down the middle and write down, and then you figure out what you believe. So I'm going to start with the Harsin is a terrible coach, we got to get rid of him. That's that side of it. The theory on that is, okay, he came in here, he was really mean, talked down to the players, they didn't like him. 18 guys left after the first year, they all hit the portal. Some of them said stuff about what a jerk he was. So he's a bad coach. Players don't like him, won't be able to recruit. And then some of his coaches left, including an offensive coordinator that he brought in and stayed a few weeks and then left. So that proves he's a real jerk, because even this new guy came in and went, I can't work with him, so he left. And then finally, there's this girl that works for him, and she's on the internet. She's very attractive, and she's young, and she was at Boise State on their website working for them, and now she comes all the way across to Auburn, and hey, there may be something, maybe a Bobby Petrino thing, and so they started playing up that aspect. And then what do fans do with all this stuff? They take it and run with it, start making jokes about it. Okay, so all of that is that side of it, including if there's something really going on with the girl, Auburn can fire him for that reason, okay?
Sure.
As we saw what happened.
I've got my own opinions about bringing her into anything.
Yep.
Because here's the deal. I mean, Harsin's wife came out and said that's nonsense. It's ridiculous. And quite frankly, that's not fair to her that she's an attractive woman who got a job. And just because she's an attractive woman who got a job, you automatically jump to the Bobby Petrino effect. And that's not fair to her. So what you're saying is you can't hire an attractive person to work for you because, gosh, who's going to say what about that? How fair is all of this to her for wanting to have a job at a better university in the SEC?
To me, you'd have to prove that before you start popping off.
Yeah, it's really aggravating.
The thing with Petrino was obvious. It was
but
provable.
There was proof there.
Here, I haven't seen anything other than here she is on the internet, and look at her. Oh,
well, they must be doing something.
Yeah, okay.
What is that?
All right, so that's one side of it. Now, here's the other side of it. There were players that left that said he was a jerk. The players that are still there are lining up behind him, and here's what they're saying. We had a bunch of guys on this team for 2 or 3 years under Malzahn that were entitled. They acted like they didn't have to follow, the coaches, do what the. I used to see Bo Nix. What's your impression of Bo Nix? My impression of him was great 1 week, totally disappeared the next week, and that was the whole time he was there.
I think Bo Nix loves Bo Nix.
You'd see him over there arguing with the coaches on the sideline. Can you imagine KJ Jefferson over there yelling at Pittman on the sideline, but you saw that with him last year. So what some of these players are saying is, we got too many entitled players on this team, and it's good that they left, because we're going to have to bring in a whole new group of players, and we're going to have some discipline around here. And yes, we need some tough coaches, and he's the coach we need. And so there's a lot of people that say that. There's fans lining up behind that. Then, as you pointed out, the wife of Brian Harsin is basically saying, this is nonsense. What are you doing here? So there's that. And then the coach that came in and then left, I mean, I don't know exactly what happened, but if I'm him and I get there and I start hearing all this stuff, I'm going, this guy's been here 1 year and all these people are trying to run him off. I'm not staying here. I don't want to be fired, 2 weeks after I take the job. So you have all that going on. Now it's back in the court. I guess the AD has a decision to make, but the president does, and then you get the board of trustees involved, and I guess they'll hear all this and decide what they're going to do. But what I was told a long time ago was that, what's his name, Kevin Steele, the defensive coordinator there, he'd been there before. He's been all over the place. He's very well respected as a coordinator. They wanted him when they wanted Malzahn out. And what happened was the school president backed the AD. Auburn is a place where boosters and fans have a history of forcing a hire. And what the president said was, this is why we have an AD. Let's let him make the hire. He brought in Harsin. He may have known what they didn't pay any attention to. They needed a disciplinarian in there. Here's what I know. If they fire him, whoever takes the job's nuts. Because they keep firing coaches. They have fired two national championship coaches and another guy that went undefeated. Fired all of them a few years after they had undefeated seasons. It's a place where, and some of it is boosters, some of it is fans. It's just a wacky place where they're constantly not satisfied with who they have. And I'll make this final point. You need an AD to hire people. And I'll look no further than Hunter Yurachek. Look at what happened here. Look at what happened before he got here with the whole Chad Morris thing. Because you had boosters involved trying to get Malzahn. They thought, and they ran off Jeff Long, because the word they got from Jimmy Sexton was, well, Gus won't talk to Jeff Long. So we get rid of our AD. We bring in a new AD, but we don't have him yet. But we got this interim AD, and then whoops, we don't have Gus. He signed a contract to stay where he was. So what do we do now? And they just kind of backed off and punted. So the interim AD, she had Mike Leach interested. She had, who else was interested? It was, Mike Norvell was interested. And she backed off of both of them and hired Chad Morris because Jerry Jones gave him a recommendation. This is not how you hire coaches. You bring in a Hunter Yurachek, and what happened to him? He had all these people saying, well, you got to hire this guy. No, hire that guy. No, hire. And you know what he said was, no, I'm going to hire Sam Pittman. And I go, what? He hasn't been a head coach before.
I'm going to go hire Eric Musselman. Who?
Yeah,
This guy up in Nevada.
Musselman, what?
Here we are.
He's hired both of those guys because he's the AD, and it's his job, more than anything else, his number one job every year is to replace coaches. He has to do a lot of other stuff, but that's the most important part. And if you're good at it, if you're a good AD, that's what you do, and that's how you avoid all this booster garbage.
Yeah, and not only that, he has been able to really make great relationships with the coaches that were here when he got here, like Mike Neighbors and Dave Van Horn and Courtney Deifel and all those.
So if you want to avoid this awful Auburn thing, and by the way, I'll just say, it's good for Arkansas fans if he gets fired, because it's going to create chaos there.
I've seen a lot on Twitter where a lot of Arkansas fans are going, if Auburn fires Brian Harsin, they will realize and go through what Arkansas went through the past 4 years before Sam Pittman got here.
It's just a mistake.
Chaos.
You apparently can't reason with some of those people.
All right, we got one more. Here we go. Finally, Tia Otis wants to know when it was
Team Otis.
Team Otis. Team Otis. I literally read that as one word, and I need a space.
Well,
in
he types it that way, but the point is,
Otis.
he's clearly,
I need a dash or something.
Is on Otis
I love
Kirk's
Otis.
team.
I love Otis Kirk too. Okay, Team Otis. I'm calling you Team Otis forever.
Otis.
It was a winter wonderland this past week here in Fayetteville. Do you have any memories of Hog games in the snow? Also, did you get out and make any snowmen with your grandkids, Mike? Oh, he also wants to know about Connor Vanover. What's Muss's thinking?
Okay, let's address the snow.
Okay.
I did not. I told my they love to build snowmen. There's pictures of them on their website, Facebook and mine, where they're building snowmen. Here's what I told them. You know, remember in the summer when you come over and we get the water hose out and I squirt you with water and we play this game where you try to sneak up on me and if I get you, but you get me first and you get to squirt me and that's great. I love that game. I'm not building snowmen. If you want to build a snowman, get your daddy or your mama to go out there because I don't build snowmen. I hate the snow. I would do just about anything to avoid it. I don't like it on my shoes. I don't like to intentionally go out into it. I'm either in my house, in a car, or here, or in Bud Walton Arena.
That's accurate. Mike,
what did I do, you guys, the other day?
We were leaving to leave work. And Mike is over in the corner giving himself a pep talk to walk outside. He was not having
Well,
any of
remember,
it.
were you with us the other day when we went to the basketball game and I asked them to let me out? They were just like, they're driving up to that little roundabout right by the thing, and they're going to have to go park all the way down in the south lot. And I said, hey, let me out. I'm walking from here. I just left them, man. I can't deal with that snow. So, no, there's no snow for me. I hate it. Now, there's snow games.
Yeah.
Snow games, I'm told there was a snow game in '72 when Joe Ferguson was the quarterback. I was in the Army back then. It wasn't on TV. I didn't see it. I'm sure there's been snow games in the 46 years I've been here. The only one I remember vaguely, because Rick Schaefer reminded me of it, it was an Auburn game, Danny Ford's first year, '93. And here's what I remember. I don't like the football press box. It's very confining. It's stuffy. You can't yell stuff when you're in there. And I like to yell when I'm at football games. Just yell random stuff. Get mad at referees.
You yell random stuff in this office.
Yeah. So I like to go down to the sidelines. But for that game, I was in the press box the whole time because of snow. I did not want snow. Now, Connor Vanover.
Yeah.
What's Muss's thinking? Well, first of all, we know he's okay, even though there was a rumor he was sick. He missed a few games. He was back, Mississippi State, and Muss was asked about it. He said he's fine. Well, he didn't play either. Now, what's his thinking? Well, I mean, let's just.
Right now, the team's.
Yeah, they're playing well, but what happens when they've put him in the game? He doesn't really play good defense. He's too slow. He doesn't block shots like he did at one point. He doesn't rebound very well. He doesn't score inside, and he doesn't hit his three-point shots that he used to hit. So my theory on this is that he came in here, they tried to turn him into what they needed, but that wasn't what was best for him because he's a 7'3", 4" perimeter guy. He's good around the perimeter. He's not very physical, but he was a good shooter. And that's gone away. And when you stick him inside, you just see his limitations. So I personally think that he's probably going somewhere else next year. I don't know that. That's just my guess. But there is one saving grace with Connor. We don't want to be too depressed about Connor.
No.
Because he has the distinction of having the best single NIL commercial I've ever seen. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at it.
Check it out.
Hey, I've seen you on TV. You're pretty good. You know what? I was a baller myself back in the day. They called me Big Shorty. Too bad we don't have a baller. I can show you a thing or two.
Oh, really? Well, it just so happens I have one right here.
I'd have to call my wife. You asked for it, you got it, big man. Show me what you got. I'm gonna make a shot!
You had enough, little man?
Sometimes, Connor, it's not what you know, but who you know.
That's funny.
Okay. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
So it's not all bad for him. Make a little money. Maybe you can go somewhere else and continue that NIL
There
deal.
you go. Somewhere in the state of Arkansas would be just fine too. But again, no clue about Connor. This was fun. Tomorrow's going to be fun. Arkansas, Auburn, #1 team in the country coming to Bud Walton Arena. You watching it from home?
Well, yeah, you gave me the day off.
I did.
And guess what I can do at home?
Not be in the snow.
No, and the other, what's the other thing I can do if I'm at home? as
You
opposed-
can yell
I can
at the
yell anything I
TV.
want.
Yes,
I can
you
yell at
can.
referees, and no
Yes.
one
Gonna
will
be a
toss
lot
me out of the
Gonna be a
arena.
lot of yelling at Bruce Pearl at the Mike Irwin house tomorrow night.
I do not like Bruce Pearl.
Okay.
Might get kicked out for that if I was at the game.
We don't need to get into that. That is it for Ask Mike this week. Thanks so much. See you next week.